The murder of Uyinene Mrwetyana further reminds us of the disregard for women's lives. A national emergency must be declared. Those are the words of former South African Deputy President and the Executive Director of UN Women, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, standing by in our New York studios with our American correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, it's over to you.
Francis, thanks so very much indeed, and always good to be on The Full View with you. And as you correctly point out, I am going to be in conversation here with the Executive Director of UN Women and South Africa's former Deputy President, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, about what is going on in South Africa that I can tell you has certainly become a global conversation. Femicide, the brutal and murderous attacks on women, part of the conversations we are having here at the United Nations and certainly around the world. She joins me now, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Very good to see you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So following the death of Uyinene Mrwetyana, and of course following countless such incidents in South Africa's most recent past, one is reminded of Karaba Mokoena, who was murdered at the hands of her boyfriend last year. 14-year-old Janika Malo, Lee Andre Jichels, Angelique Clark-Abrams, Jesse Hess. These are just some of the names of victims murdered at the hands of men in recent weeks. You've called now for a national emergency to be declared in South Africa. What do you mean by that?
Well, firstly, condolences to the families of all these women and girls who met their life in such, their death in such an brutal manner. We are in a crisis in South Africa. A state of emergency would enable the president to take extraordinary measures to scale the interventions that are so much needed in South Africa, to fast-track the implementation also of some of the policies and interventions that have already been agreed upon. The backlog of cases of the crimes that have been committed against women, we already agreed that needs attention. It's actually not happening. We need to give him the powers to push those who are supposed to be doing this work to do it.
So essentially you're saying these are exceptional circumstances that need an exceptional response. Let me just read you what it means for a president to declare a state of emergency. Only when the life of the nation is threatened by war, invasion, general insurrection,
on women's bodies,
disorder, natural disasters or other public emergencies. And if the ordinary laws and government powers are not sufficient to restore peace and order. Is that essentially what we are saying?
Exactly. This describes the situation we have now. And the lack of agencies on the part of those that are supposed to do the work means that we need extraordinary measures to support the implementation and to facilitate the interventions that are needed at the scale that which were needed. The fact, and I'm not talking about short-term interventions, because strengthening also the capacity of law enforcement is not something that can happen overnight. You therefore need a concentrated effort until you fix the problem. We are not talking about the 21 days that sometimes is allowed in a state of emergency, because we don't think that this problem can be sorted out in 21 days. We need resources to be allocated for these interventions to be properly executed. You cannot wait for long processes of budgeting in a normal cycle. Because it's an emergency, you need to find some short-term measures so that you can respond now before we lose too many and more lives.
Clearly, this is not a new situation. We've had these discussions before. Have you been, or are you expressing in your call for a national emergency this notion that perhaps the government or civil society or even the private sector have really not come to the party on this issue?
Not enough. You need to begin with the South African men to take a stand, because here there is also the problem of both committing the crimes, and omission, those who just omit to be present and to support. It's not good to be a good, law-abiding, caring man who is indifferent to the suffering that is all around you. Right now, I would have hoped we would be seeing many more leaders, men in particular, standing up and making sure that they're making their voices heard and they're taking action and using, in some cases, the considerable powers they have as leaders of companies, of churches, of institutions that can bring about change.
I want to talk about why South African men behave so barbarically. I want to talk about why why they attack women in this way. And one of the things that struck me as a South African man was really coming to terms with the fact that the greatest fear that women have in our societies is the fear of violence, and it's the fear of being attacked, whether you're getting into your car to drive to work, whether you're leaving your home to go out at night.
Coming home.
It's the attack, or in the home. It's the physical violence that women face in this world. And that's something I think that's important for men to understand, not so?
Oh, no, absolutely. A home is not a place of refuge for many women, as we know. Walking in the street is not safe. A place of work is not safe. So a public transport, a train, bus is not safe. So everywhere you look, those of us who are having girls in our care, we fear, not just for our friends, for our colleagues, we fear for our children every day because we don't live with them. We cannot see what's happening to them every day.
And that's why we need a community around individual women, right? If you see a woman being attacked on a train or being spoken to in a certain way, it is everybody's responsible to speak up.
Everybody's responsibility.
Let me give you some facts about the police force, the police service in South Africa. The Independent Police Investigative Directorate, IPID, essentially the police watchdogs, 2018-2019 report reveals that at least 55 rape complaints against police officers were investigated in the 6 months between April and September 2018. 32 were off-duty policemen, 23 were on-duty policemen. What does that say about our society?
Society is broken because anyone who is in uniform has to be a source of comfort. When you see a policeman, you must be comforted that here comes help. When we are not comforted by the sight of someone in uniform, when you are not safe in the hands of a law enforcer, God forbid. So these are some of the issues in a state of emergency we would have to address. How do you fix and weed out these elements? We actually need in South Africa a sex offenders register, properly managed so that it is credible, that people are not smeared and accused if they have not done anything, but also those who have become repeat offenders are also exposed, and we know about it, and we protect the women who are reporting from backlash from these men. So you need due process.
Something similar to what they have in terms of pedophiles, for example, in the United States, right?
Definitely.
So a register, sex offenders register, you commit a crime, you rape a woman, you go to jail, but you also then for life
because these
are
sex
branded.
Offenders, they are priests, they are leaders in public institutions, they are public servants. They have authority and power over the people they abuse. There's got to be a way in which we deter this behavior and we expose also those that perpetrate with impunity.
I want to talk a little bit about the calls in South Africa now for a reintroduction of the death penalty as it relates to crimes of femicide, crimes against women. It's a question I raised with the Secretary General's spokesperson a short time ago. Let's listen to what Stefan Dujarric had to say. Given the epidemic of femicide in South Africa, the country's Justice Minister said the question of reintroducing the death penalty will be taken to Cabinet for further discussion. Quote, whether we are open to a referendum or not, at this stage, I cannot say. What says the United Nations?
Our principal position is that we stand against the use of the death penalty. The issue of femicide is an extremely important one. Those who commit the crimes need to be punished to the full extent of the law, and societies as a whole also have to deal with the underpinning reasons why we see these crimes, and these are crimes that need to be punished. But our position, whether it's in South Africa or anywhere else in the world, is that we stand against the use of the death penalty.
If I could ask, what informs that position?
We feel it's a cruel punishment, and the rules. I mean, the legal instruments in the UN have always stood against the death penalty.
All right, we seem to have lost that link with the SABC correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Let's see if he can hear us. Sherwin, we played some of that information coming from the UN. Maybe you'd like to pick it up from there.
This person saying it's not UN policy. What's your sense of this call in South Africa? You know, you are the former deputy president. This was struck down by the Constitutional Court in the mid-1990s. What do you say to this call, given the mandate that you represent here?
Death penalty has no place in a society that wants to advance human rights. There is no evidence that killing people deter other people from being violent. We must fix our criminal justice system, because by leaving our criminal justice system as it is, poorly serving our people, and introduce another intervention that is brutal, we're actually not advancing society and solving our problems. Is a shortcut. It's a short-term satisfaction. We are not squarely facing the bigger problems in our society: social cohesion, toxic masculinity,
but you understand
taking responsibility.
You understand the frustration, though. This is why people are desperate,
but
right?
That is why we need leaders to engage people, because you cannot follow any call that is populist, even if it is detrimental to the bigger objectives of the society we are advancing.
We're talking about the advancing of society. You might also be aware that just this week in South Africa, there are accusations, there are reports of xenophobic attacks on foreigners in the country. Many of those foreigners are women. What do you make of it? There's been some criticism, though, that authorities in South Africa are talking about criminal behavior rather than xenophobic behavior. What's your sense of what's going on?
For me,
it's xenophobia.
Yeah, it is. There's criminal element in it. There's probably everything that is wrong now melting into this horrible pot. But we cannot excuse xenophobia. We have to deal with criminality head on. And again, we need to raise the debate and lead from the front on this issue. I was glad to see that there was a call for public representatives to go back to communities to engage, because anyway, as public leaders, our responsibility is to be forefront and to be close to communities in times like this.
Proactive and not reactive.
Proactive and sustained, because this problem is not going away. It's been recurring over and over again. I also want to ask that we change the language that we use. It is not so much that we're talking about violence against women. We must talk about men killing women, because we hide the men in this language that is just focusing on how you empathize and you support women. We must confront the fact that men are perpetrators. When we give figures now, we need to talk not so much about so many women die, we must talk about so many men kill, so that many men can actually see the hand and the role that men have in this. I'm hoping this might also help some of the men who are bystanders realize how much damage is being done, sometimes in their name, for those who think ubudoda, you know, being a strong man means that you are violent, you overpower, and you impose yourself and others. We need voices that are louder than what we have right now, coming from men in our society.
Because it's a fact that women are not killing women, right?
Women are not killing women, and they're not killing men. I'm not saying that it never happens, but overwhelmingly the crisis that we have is of men who are killing women. We are having men who are killing people in general. This violence in society.
Let me ask you one final question. If you had a conversation with President Cyril Ramaphosa today, what would you say to him?
I would urge the president to use all the powers vested in him. He has our support. He has the support of the South African society. He also is a man of law. He understands the law, so I do not doubt that he will have excesses. I know that he will be cautious about how he uses power, but we need to see the might of his power in front of us, and we also need to stand up behind him and support him, because this needs our leaders, not just him, all the leaders to be there, because it's not only government that will solve this, because government cannot be in every bedroom, in every street, in every bus, and that is why there is responsibility to be distributed. All of us need to do something.
It's a bit like climate change, all hands on deck.
All hands on deck.
Executive Director, thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
The Executive Director of UN Women and former Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, speaking to us, Francis, about not gender-based violence per se, but men killing women. Let's reframe the debate. That's a message to the President and certainly to the people of South Africa. Back to you.
Thank you very much. A very important voice. That was SABC correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease in conversation with the head of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka.